The Game Awards. The show opted to be the Oscars of gaming as Geoff Keighley had hoped for. And for a few years, it seemed like they not only could match up with the Oscars, but they may soar above them. Except nowadays, they're seen as a glorified E3 conference where you come for the announcements, you stay for the announcements, and give or take a year, you forget about the awards.
Please wrap it up.
I know it's not a big statement, but I still will take Geoff Keighley as a presenter over Jimmy Kimmel. There's that, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah. Look. I will just say this. Geoff Keighley has, not exactly lost all dignity, but that is not for lack of trying. But, that said, no matter how up, down, all around, or absolutely crazy a year is, there is a constant we can always look forward to, that being the occurrence of the Game Awards.
And the bullshit they provide.
Yes, this is Squirm with a tiny touch of Blue Zone Comms' predictions of the 2024 Game Awards.
Or at the very least, our votes, because again, as per tradition, Geoff Goffredo the Magnifico has actually planted his circus tent and is going all out. We do have everything. We have the monkey from the east, clowns with card tricks, automaton that jump and dance, and even a man who turns into snake, and worst of all, the worst nightmare of a conservative, the idea that diversity in a society is actually a positive thing. The horror.
Gods. But yeah, look, like I mentioned, Geoff Keighley has managed to put on a show that keeps people coming back here and there. However, if you've been paying attention, you may know that as of lately the years, he has come under mass suspicion of having, well, pretty obvious biases and whatnot. And while he does say that, oh, these are community choices, sometimes a lot of choices or decisions just feel like stuff that the industry would want to be seen as, like, keep in mind, a lot of times with soundtracks, what was the ones that would win? More so the orchestral ones over anything not orchestral, essentially. What would be the big games up front and center? Well, the ones that the big media was talking about, as opposed to maybe some of the smaller ones that arguably did deserve that praise here and there. Again, I'm not going to act like Geoff Keighley has gone full-on corporate, and he has still had some cool moments where he does stand up for the little guy, but I will say he's kind of far from his 2015 days when he actually read Konami the Riot right to their faces.
And even then, Jova, that was like, as we say in my country, shooting on the Red Cross. Congratulations. It was basically the easiest thing you could have done, I guess.
It was seen as profound at the time because a lot of people thought, pissing off a company that big
It's
would
the
be
same
bad,
effect of
yeah.
Sony announcing the PS4. Yes, technically speaking, it was technically the obvious thing to do and the right thing to do, but in hindsight, it was technically easy and not more not more worth than, good job, you did the obvious thing to do. But about this year, let me just start with something. Despite what you said, Jova, I am a bit curious because a lot of the companies that sponsored the Game Awards and subsequently the choices of choosing the candidates made me think that we might have had a specific set of voting of particular things, but I argue that both the presence of some title and the absence of others made me question some of them. For instance, I don't know how much you know about the game Dustborn, but I was absolutely confident that despite the abysmal score that it got in terms of selling copies, it would have probably still been nominated for any category because it's a game that heavily involves political themes, just poorly written, let's just say that. But at least would have been present for like one or two categories like Best Indie or Art Direction. But no nominations whatsoever for it, which is, like I said, very weird. But again, that's just an example. We can mention more as we go on. So, let's start with, of course, the main meat and potato of the entire thing, as we start with every single year in terms of voting, the Game of the Year category. I don't remember how many there were probably last year, but this time we have 6 contenders. And you can tell that they try to make it a bit varied, although in some cases again, puzzling decisions. We have Astrobot from Team Asobi and published by Sony. Then we have an indie game, Balatro, developed by Local Funk and published by Playstack. Basically, an indie game about imagine playing poker but with roguelike rules, with mix and matching, special rulings, and all the sorts, and without a single shred of a story mode, believe it or not. It's pure arcade madness.
Yeah, I kind of got the idea it was a card game, but I guess what puzzles me is it sounds nice, but what made it Game of the Year?
No idea. I was going to mention later, but
yeah, I'll go into it later.
Then we have Black Myth Wukong, developed and published by Game Science. Then we have a DLC, Elden Ring Shadow of the Earth Tree, developed by FromSoft and published by Bandai Namco. Then we have Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, developed and published by Square Enix. And then we have Metaphor Refantatio, developed by Studio Zero and published by Atlus and consequently Sega. So a couple of things.
Which elephant are we going to address first?
Okay.
We
were already talking about Balatro, so let's go with that.
So I haven't played it yet, but the way it's being described, it has a similar mind chemicals as Vampire Survivors does.
Yeah,
it's like
it's very
once you get a good combo going, you can be playing for hours and didn't notice. It's like, oh wait, what? Oh, that's weird.
Mm-hmm. And like
I can understand why it is nominated. My thing is, I didn't know this came out this year because I first heard about it during the Nintendo Indie Direct that happened a few months ago.
I don't remember the exact release date. It also had a couple of cross company, crossovers. It had a bunch of themed cards after stuff like Dave the Diver, I think, and in turn they had a minigame similar to it in Dave the Diver.
I will say
that's why it
this,
came out in February. Okay.
Now, far be it from me to write it off as something that doesn't deserve the title, even though I kind of have my doubts, but part of me does wonder if lately the Game Awards have put in a mandate that at least one indie game has to be a Game of the Year contender, just so they can say, oh, no, we do pay attention to the small guys.
And it's like my Chinese sim in arcades, it does feel less of a genuine effort and more like we're filling a quota more than anything.
Because I will be honest, if Balatro wins, I'll eat a hat. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Balatro's a bad game, but again, look at like the lineup.
Yeah.
And then Balatro, and look, I'm not saying an indie game can never be Game of the Year. Like, look, if you would put something like Shovel Knight, Undertale, Bloodstained when it eventually came out, essentially, those could arguably be Game of the Year tier just off of their popularity alone. And again, I'm not saying Balatro does not have the popularity, but again, the most I've been able to gauge is that it is a poker game. Again, not saying that disqualifies it, but I'm just saying, I feel like it was kind of just put in there to go, look, guys, we remembered the indie games, therefore we're not biased.
As a reminder, Joe, the Game Awards 2021 had It Takes Two winning over Deathloop, Metroid Dread, Psychonauts 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Resident Evil Village. You can make an argument that was a bit of a special case because Joseph Ferris is a friend of Geoff Keighly, but it was kind of coming out of nowhere. I don't think it's gonna happen for this case, but because like you said, the rest of the lineup feels way of a different class. But let's talk about the other elephant in the room, aka Shadow of the Earth Tree. Now, prefacing this, I love Elden Ring. I genuinely do. It's genuinely one of my favorite games of recent times. But even I would be the first to say that the DLC should not be contending for Game of the Year. Sure,
Can I ask a question?
it could show up in another category, maybe even make a dedicated category of Best DLC Episode if you want. But
I'm legit surprised we don't have a DLC category yet.
Can you play this expansion without buying the base game?
No.
Nope.
You actually have to, especially because you need to have defeated an optional boss in the main game to actually access the DLC content. It's a standard procedure from Software games, Edge.
It makes sense given how deeply knitted into the lore the DLC is. Like, let me put it like this. If you were to try and play the DLC without playing the rest of the game, A, you'd be confused with a lot of what's supposed to be a twist or not, whatnot. And B, well, like most DLCs, you probably would not enjoy it as much on its own because it is, as a DLC should be, an extension of the main narrative.
On a pure gameplay explanation, Dad, yes, you can do weird challenge shit and beat it at level 1 if you really want to. So, on a gameplay basis, if you believe hard enough, you can do it. But, like Jova said, a lot of the nooks and crannies, are integrated with the main base game. But again, the point still stands. I'm sorry, but I don't think this qualifies as Game of the Year material. It is worth also noting that when it comes to DLC episode, this is massive. I stated ever since it came out, this totally justifies its price tag of $40 compared to stuff that we got, for example, like Kingdom Hearts 3 DLC, which was $30 and I argue was way overpriced for the content that we got. This is $40 and it's practically at least a third, if not half of the game in terms of content size. So yes, I do believe it is justified with that kind of price. But again, don't really feel like it should be in this category. If it was an actual separate game on its own, I probably would have considered it more. But as it is, no. But outside of that, how about the actual voting? Edge.
Should we talk about how some people are arguing that Rebirth is technically kind of a little too remake-ish? Well, I'll give it this. Even with the remake thing, compared to Balatro and Shadow of the Erdtree, I think it at least has earned its spot there.
It was still also my most anticipated game of this year, so and again, this is just part of the course for me because
that's fine.
Spoiler alert, that is the one that gets my vote. I know that. But let me also say this. Outside of Shadow of the Erdtree and Balatro, the other three contenders, Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, and Metaphor e Fantazio, if any of the other three won the Game of the Year category, I would be perfectly fine with that. I just don't feel like voting them for different reasons for this category. Astrobot, because as solid as a game it is, I want to consider all the factors. And the story is that, compared to the others, is a bit more simple. The gameplay is dedicated for a relatively young to teen audience, more than anything, So while perfectly solid and good and a fun experience on its own, compared to the others, I argue doesn't qualify enough to get the votes. Re Fantazio has the advantage of being a complete new IP, but as I said in the past, I don't think the art style that was used in the current Persona games really fits with the more medieval theme that this game is going for. I think it's a bit, the style clashes a bit with what they're going for. The character design in a vacuum is actually pretty great. A couple of the characters, really do stand out, like the protagonist or even some of the villains. It's just that when you look at it, you're like, oh, these are Persona characters cosplaying rather than, an actual original characters for a fantasy setting.
That does get me thinking. A, do you think Metaphor of Re Fantazio could have just been called Persona 6? Like, different time date and whatnot?
It was specifically made with the idea of being a complete new original IP for Atlus, and its gameplay design makes it more similar to the Digital Devil Saga games rather than the Persona in terms of sub-series.
Ooh, that's really interesting.
But let me get back on track. The reason instead why Black Myth Wukong doesn't get my vote on the matter is complicated. It's a very fun game on its own and a way of exploring the actual mythos of Wukong and the journey to the West.
Oh yeah, I too love Monkey God of War.
People believe it might be a bit Souls-like, but no, it's slightly different in terms of gameplay approach. The problem to me is that I probably still would have voted if Rebirth wasn't there, but there's also a bit of an omission later on. of another game, which causes a bit of a conflict of interest, and I will explain as it goes on. So as for it is, if Rebirth hadn't been present, I would have voted Black Myth Wukong, but as it is, I'm voting Rebirth. Dejimon.
So because I'm not made of money, I know most of these games were $70. The other one I have played was Astrobot. It's a really fun game, so I'm just going to vote on that for principle. I mean, I'm not just saying what.
Astrobot is so good. It's so good. I wish the PlayStation IPs were real.
Please don't make me not vote against.
No, again, as established, the team of Zombie really doesn't have any fault. People believed they were just, capitalizing on the whole problem, but the problem is about the publisher, while they genuinely seem to have the heart for respecting the legacy of these IPs.
Which is definitely the best outcome altogether.
What about you, Drova?
For me, this one feels definitely more a case of omission, in the sense where I will only really raise an objection if Balatro or Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree get picked. Again, no stones against Balatro. I am certain that it earned its fan base and whatnot. But, again, part of my objection against it is, well, it's a poker game at the end of the day with not really too many special bells and whistles. Yes, there's the special combination stuff you mentioned, but other than that, it feels like if a version of Tetris won Game of the Year, essentially. It just feels, well, like I've said, it feels like this is part of the mandated indie pick for Game of the Year, essentially. Now, it's not impossible that it can win, as you mentioned. It Takes Two won, although for as much issue as I took with It Takes Two sweeping awards, it at least did feel like it earned a lot of those awards, and to be fair, as far as indie games go, It Takes Two was pretty high budget overall, whereas it's not just a case of Balatro not feeling up to it, it's again the competition. Like, all of the other games here feel like they are out of that game's league, essentially. This is not me putting down indie games, but it's just a fact of life that indie games typically will not have as high a budget. The thing about indie games that gets us to really appreciate them is when they'll do stuff that the industry is not pushing, essentially. The thing is, for whatever issues we had with the industry, a lot of the big budget titles turned out this year were pretty good and stellar, essentially. That's
from
not
my
to say that the
understanding, Kukuzu from SSNB, he's still playing Rebirth. He hasn't beaten it yet because it is too long. It feels like the first game that's genuinely worth $70 because of the amount of content that there is.
It is definitely something games will have to contend with now that we have a $70 price point justifying that price, essentially. But yeah, no, Balatro just, again, I feel it's out of its league here. The other one that, again, I'll raise a fuss, not a fuss, but again, one that I'll go, come on guys, really, is the Elden Ring one, and that is, again, strictly because of DLC. I, too, am a big fan of Elden Ring. Believe it or not, I got more into Elden Ring than Dark Souls, honestly. This was actually mainly more so due to the lore more than the gameplay. Not to say that the gameplay is bad, but the lore is very, very, very interesting. And pretty messed up, but that kind of goes without saying. But yeah, no, it's a DLC. Like, I feel like if a DLC, and not like, a glorified DLC, like, this is literally DLC. If a DLC wins Game of the Year, I feel like, that opens the floodgates to a lot of companies trying to do some pretty foolish things regarding DLC, trying to jack up those prices just because, hey, if a DLC could win Game of the Year, we could totally do that too and get all the press, essentially.
And to my understanding, Elden Ring's DLC wasn't planned, right? That's why it took so long?
Okay, yes and no, Dejimon. it technically incorporates a lot of content that was cut away from the base game, like the character of Saint Trina, for example, and the truth about Mikola, the character of Mikola. But it does provide enough original material that makes you think, yeah, so they totally had to, create a lot of this stuff from the ground up in that year and a half, I think it took for it to develop.
From what I can understand, the DLC was planned. It's just stuff got rocky, and then I think they've said that this is going to be the last of additional content.
It's
at
still
least to
sold
that
like
degree.
hotcakes, but I don't remember if also there's a dispute between From Software and Bandai Namco right now for the IP. But again, that's
FromSoft bought the IP.
That's still going a bit off topic. So go on, Jova. Tell us who you voted for.
Yeah, ultimately, for me, it comes down between Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor Re Fantasio. Each one was a great contribution to their particular genre of gaming, and each one, for the most part, managed to justify their price points, essentially. Astrobot is a great celebration of Sony's history and whatnot, and again, while we do joke a lot about how Sony sometimes do things these days, I gotta give him this. Astrobot is a great addition to the PS5's library. Black Myth Wukong, or as I jokingly call it, Monkey God of War, essentially, is also a very stellar game that shows the lengths of which we can go through with gaming technology. Not only that, but the gameplay is just that solidly good for its genre. Metaphor Re Fantasio, again, it's a relatively unique enough from Persona new series that Sega / Atlas / Studio Zero can potentially work on, essentially. I do recall jokes that, oh, it's basically a spin-off of Persona, but no, like Tio mentioned, in hindsight, it does have enough of its own identity, and again, the game was good and fun. That being said, I'm gonna have to give this to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has possibly the most packed into it of all these games. And I don't just mean the gameplay or the game length, I mean all the different potential routes you can get from that game, essentially. All the different combinations of dialogue you can get to form your own adventure. And, of course, most famously, the different dating routes they gave. And I don't just mean like, oh, they remade the dating routes from the original. Like, they added on some new ones. Some more platonic than others, obviously. Oh, and Tifa and Cloud Shippers got a huge win. That was a plus. My only... Well, I have a few issues with Rebirth, but I guess my biggest issue is, well... Just like the first part of Remake, the ending, and how it feels like Square are kind of going out of their way to needlessly confuse the audience at this point, but more details on that are best saved for the actual commentary of Rebirth, essentially.
Eventually.
All you need to know is that it's overall great fun, just expect to be confused again. I mean, given the writers on hand. But yeah, no, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth wins my vote of the bunch here.
Alright, next category, Best Game Direction, awarded for outstanding creative vision and innovation in game direction and design. And much like the other years, you can just copy-paste whatever we said because it's literally the same contestants.
No, I'm sorry. The second place medal, huh?
Okay, I've got to talk about this. Like, guys... More variety, please. And you know what? Okay, I get it. Maybe one could argue, well, if these guys are contenders for Game of the Year, obviously their direction was just that great that must have been the reason for that. And I'm like, sure, yeah, but at that point, is there much a point other than just, basic procedure?
Alright, that being said, what did you vote, Drova?
Now, while Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was my personal favorite, trying to be a little different here, I'm gonna give it to Metaphor Re Fantasio because out of all these, aside from Black Myth Wukong, again, Balatro, you're good, but it's a poker game. There's only so much that can go into game direction and innovation for that, essentially. Astrobot was a sequel. Again, it's a damn good sequel, but Metaphor Ray Fantasio is something that kind of had to come up from nowhere. Well, not entirely come up from nowhere. It had to kind of come off as like a spin-off of Persona, which, again, some might argue that gave it something of a handicap, but that it was able to diversify itself away from Persona and has arguably generated a whole new series that Sega can now use is in and of itself a testament to its greatness, essentially. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Again, fantastic DLC. But, going off of strictly the definition, does it really innovate?
It's literally just more of the same game. So,
yeah,
no.
It
shouldn't
again,
be
it's
here
DLC.
by all means.
It's DLC, guys. I'm sorry, but it feels like we're just trying to award Elden Ring again. I'm sorry.
Anyway,
oh god.
What about you, Dej?
I gave it a metaphor because, like Jova said, the fact that Sega was able to make a new IP and show that the Persona's art style, it wasn't just this one-time fluke. I'm really impressed. I do want to play it, but just wait.
Alright, as for me, believe it or not, I'm gonna give this one to Balatro, because on a technicality, because trying to strictly go through the description of the award, creative vision innovation, because Re Fantazio, it's still, the traditional turn-based formula that Atlus perfected, since its origins, and again, it's more akin to the PS2 era specifically. So, while the art style and the story and the themes are technically new, the gameplay is still relatively solid, but more of the same. We already talked about Shadow of the Erdtree. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is an evolution, technically, of remake, but you can argue it's not as much compared to the rest. Black Myth Wukong probably would be the one that gets the closest to it, but its gameplay clearly has also other, major follow the lead, things, mostly as mentioned to stuff like God of War 2018, and Astrobot is once again more of the same of Astro's Rescue Mission, So technically speaking, the one that stands out is indeed Balatro. Sure, it may not have too much in terms of something, but it is technically new, and which qualifies to me as creative vision and innovation in game direction, because technically speaking, no one really had done a similar game beforehand. So yes, we're good with that in my book. All right
then.
Next
one is Best
Narrative.
For outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game, essentially. Our applicants for this category are Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, now making its third appearance on the list. That said, aside from Metaphor Ray Fantazio, we finally mix things up by having Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, and the Silent
Hill 2 remake.
2.
What
okay, so can I just say this? Hellblade 2, it came out and barely anyone talked about it, and I have not really heard people talk about it to this day.
The story is technically fine as it is, just not, something that elevates the medium. So
I will just say
good job, Tamim.
I will say this, I kind of pity the people at Ninja Theory who may very well be fearing their studio's closure given what's been going on over there, essentially. But that being said, Hellblade 2 itself, I mean, again, I'm sorry, it didn't raise the roof or anything. Were there not other games with gripping narratives we could have put here instead?
We could. Let me just give you an example to go back to the thing that I was going to say about Black Myth Wukong. A little indie game called Nine Souls. It's a game that is completely 2D hand-drawn, so it would have been qualifiable also for stuff like art direction. And also has very good music. It's a Metroidvania with a very good action component for its gameplay. A very interesting story in case of narrative that takes inspiration from Taoism and mixes it with cyberpunk, a bit like Azura's Wrath does with Hinduism. And as such, it would have been qualifiable here. Arguably, if you ask me, it could have been qualified as a Game of the Year as an indie better than Balatro. What's the problem? It's made by a Taiwanese studio. And you definitely cannot have that if Black Myth Wukong is having so many spots, because poor Xi Jinping might get actually frightened by it otherwise. And Geoff clearly doesn't want to piss him off, does he? At least that's what I'm fearing it is. If it's not, I'm glad I would be wrong on the matter, but that's the gut feeling that I'm getting with this. Because Nine Soul is not nominated for a single thing. And it's a disgrace.
It's gonna be one of those weird omissions, which I'll be mentioning a few weird omissions later on, essentially, but, yeah, so...
But regardless, the lineup of these, we talked about, at least Senua is still a sequel that, as a result manages to have a rightly original plot that follows a previous game. Because most of the other contenders here don't feel like we qualify here. The Silent Hill 2 remake is as the...
A remake?
Well, okay, that's the thing, Dej. It manages to be its strongest suit, being this faithful to the original, but for this category it makes no sense because it's literally just the original game with very little new things added, so it doesn't really qualify as best narrative if you ask me. But no, it's a thing. Final Fantasy Rebirth, or 7 Rebirth also technically will qualify for this. Yes, it is true that it changes the card on the table in order to have the events fold a bit differently, and it still injects its own original material, particularly towards the ending. But at its core, it feels like the most of the Disc 1 journey of the original game as a result. So for this specific purpose alone, it still feels cheap. And I have to say, and I'm sorry to say this, but I argue Like a Dragon Infinite Well story kinda sucked.
Oh, really? It did?
No,
Oh,
I really did not enjoy it. First of the Yakuza Like a Dragon games plot that I genuinely thought it was a miss. It feels to me like the lacking of the main guy that was behind the most of the series. Is felt in some fashion. I hope that the pirate game with Majima will bring things up, but no, like these ain't cheap for me. So
like the only negative thing I heard besides the game is too long is the story kind of botches itself on the third act.
Again, I will not go into spoilers, but yes, it's basically that. So my vote goes for Metaphor e Fantazio as a result. Sure, it might be a bit relatively cliched in terms of fantasy storytelling, but it's technically the most original and enjoyable of the plots in this. So I'll take it. Jova, what about you?
I'll admit, this is tricky for me, if only because each one has stuff holding its back, I'll be honest. Hellblade 2, like I've mentioned, that one did not make any waves, and from what I've seen, well, it's just there. Sure, I'll be there for the commentary, but, I don't know, I just don't feel anything, granted.
Can I ask this? Would Hellblade 2's narrative been better if it had a different protagonist?
No, not really. The fulcrum still has to be Senua and her struggle with her own sanity.
Yeah. From what I understand, Hellblade is basically Ninja Fury's answer to Heavenly Sword, essentially. But yeah, look, we've already talked about how Heavenly Sword was, and that wasn't exactly great. But at least it gave us Naruto, a pretty cool protagonist. Hellblade 2, from what I've seen, doesn't even have that, essentially. If the protagonist itself is boring me, you can imagine how the story didn't really do anything for me either. Granted, I did not take a deep, in-depth look at the game, but again, you know what they say about first impressions, and Hellblade 2 wasn't doing it for me. Silent Hill 2. It's Silent Hill 2. Which, yes, good story, but would I call it the most in-depth great story? No, I would not. I feel like Silent Hill kind of relies more on the story that's not told than the story that is told, if that makes any sense, essentially.
It's funny considering 2 is actually a lot of people's fan favorite of the game. Again, I argue the major problem here, Jova, is the fact that it's rehashing the same plot, and for the description of this award, Outstanding Storytelling Narrative Development, it feels cheap at the very least. I'm still commend Bluebird team for not, fucking it up, but still.
Yeah, again, I'm not even saying that the story is bad in Silent Hill 2, it's just that, well, yeah, like you mentioned, this is a remake. By nature, remakes, cop from the original. That's not to say that a remake can't improve on it, but from what I understand, Silent Hill 2 doesn't really go out of its way to remake the wheel or anything. It's the same story for the most part. So, what about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth? I'm gonna be honest, I'm not as familiar with the plot of that game. I haven't gotten to covering it, essentially. That being said, I've heard mixed things about it. What I can assure you is that I've not exactly heard a crowd of people rushing to praise the story. So, that leads me to two finalists, Metaphor Ray Fantatio and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is tricky. Like Silent Hill 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has that remake factor going for it. To give it credit, though, I feel like it does change more than Silent Hill 2, and there's definitely a lot more you do in this than what you originally did in this part of Final Fantasy VII. And Metaphor Ray Fantatio is, well, again, I don't want to get too spoilery, but it is basically its own thing, essentially. It's a good story. Not much more I can say. It's a tough pick, though. I guess I'm ultimately going to go with Metaphor Ray Fantatio, if only because it did not have an ending that drove me up the wall like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did. Like, I'm sorry, writers, but you gotta let go of those Square Enix isms of needing to sound needlessly complex to sound smarter.
Trust the plan, Jova.
Yes.
So does Titus show up?
First of all, it's Tidus, Dej. Second, no. Speaking of which, Dej, what about your vote?
Oh, how I wish I was actually paying attention to any of these game stores, because again, I couldn't buy them and I wanted to like play them for myself. But the one that interests me the most is Infinite Wealth. Just to see, okay, you're in a new location and you have the story of the two protagonists teaming up. I did hear about the one funny side quest where a lady is hitting on Ichiban to show him the miracles of Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
And her main plan is like, fuck me. Ichiban's sorry, I have a girlfriend. Oh, okay. Never mind. But from what I understand about Metaphor, it does have a lot of interesting lore. And it doesn't really feel condescending. It's just like, yes. Even if most of it is racism bad or something like that.
It's more about, society needs to more inclusive and, pondering society about the arts, and liberal thinking, can potentially grow better rather than one that is closed on its insides. So, something like that. All right.
I'll just give it to Metaphor then.
Next up is Best Art Direction for outstanding creative and or technical achievement in artistic design and animation. And we have five contenders, and returning we have Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, and Risha Novietri and Metaphor Fantasio. The only other newcomer is the indie Neva, developed by Nomada Studio and published by Devolver Digital. And
alright, can I just say this? Why is Shadow of the Erdtree in this many times? Like, look, it was one thing, already kind of an off thing putting it in the first two categories, but okay, it was the installment for that. But again, if a DLC is getting into this many categories, I feel like this may open the floodgates. And mind you, I am not one to say that DLC can never stand on its own. There are some DLC ploys that actually have evolved into essentially their own games, but again, with Best Art Direction, would this not just be doubling down on Elden Ring, I say once again?
It really feels like it, yes.
It's like, dudes, if you're sad or mad that Elden Ring didn't get some of these awards, maybe make... obviously they can't just make Elden Ring 2 out of the get-go, but you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
Like, in hindsight, this feels like a ton of other games that were snubbed could have come back in this way, shape, or form, so why suddenly does Elden Ring get to be the first?
That being said, I guess my vote is torn a bit between Black Myth Wukong and Neva. Metaphor Fantasio, like I said, has a solid art style of its own, but it suffers a bit of, recycling some of the same traits as done for, the previous Persona titles, and I argue it's, something that actually detracts a bit from the game, in my opinion. That being said, the reason why I'm a bit hesitant towards Neva is because that in itself also is has an art style that is similar to the developers' previous titles that they did. I forgot this title, but it's something that still looks roughly the same. While back with Wukong, despite going for the more photorealism, an angle that is slightly similar to the Souls-like games, seems to be a bit solid. But I have to be honest, I guess if I had to choose, I'm gonna go with Neva, so I'm voting for that one. Might as well, especially because if I recall correctly, it's not nominated for many other categories, if not any at all.
Yeah, I'll go for Neva on that principle. Because I realized that what I voted for Metaphor on the previous one, I thought that also meant art direction.
Alright, Jova, what about you?
It's a tricky one for me. Like, Neva would be the easy one to say, if only because, it's the one new one that popped up. I'm not voting for Elden Ring because, like I said, I'm sorry. Art direction, it is legit the same as the original game. It feels like you're just doubling down for Elden Ring with that one. Black Myth Wukong. It is great. It has great graphical fidelity, but the art style, I'm not sure if I could really call it a creative or a unique one. Mind you, it's a good art style, but it's like basically the power of the system allows for the most realistic looking of graphics. That in and of itself feels like its art style, which again is not a bad art style, but it's not a unique one I would go out of my way to really reward with the award, essentially. And Astrobot. Great art style, but
No, I think I argue it's a bit simplistic for this category itself. It's still packed with charm, enough to make it an entertaining experience, and I will take that over your average photorealistic, walking simulator that Sony pumps these days most of the time. But for this category, I argue there are better players.
It's neat, cartoony, but again, a little too simplistic for me to feel like it deserves the award on this one. Like, Neva is essentially, like I mentioned, the new one on the list here and there, but I can't lie, I'm a bit more drawn to Metaphor Ray Fantasio's one. I feel a bit icky about it because Metaphor has shown up quite a few times, but if I'm going with what my heart says, yeah, I gotta give it to Metaphor Ray Fantasio. And speaking of what my heart says, Best Score in Music is the next category for Outstanding Music, inclusive of score, original song, and/or licensed soundtracks. Our ones here are, stop me if you've heard this before, for the first three, Astrobot, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor Ray Fantasio. And also returning is Silent Hill 2. The only new one for this is Stellar Blade. Okay, so we have a few elephants in the room here. First of all, we are unfortunately so far seeming to have a year of repetition amongst the installments. I forget how this compares to how last year did it.
The last couple of years have been on this track, yes, Jova.
Which is definitely an issue, especially in music, which brings us to the second elephant in the room here.
Right.
Let me guess, Sonic.
Actually, that was going to be point number 3. Point number 2 is, really? Silent Hill 2? Like, again,
it's worth noting that the entire score was not recycled by the first game, but Akira Yamaoka went back and redid the entire track, all the tracks, including new ones.
That in
so this has stands on the same ground roughly as Rebirth, if you ask me.
And yeah, point number 3, like Dej brought up. Really? You really snubbed a Sonic game again for best score in music? Like, look,
it's pretty clear to me Geoff doesn't like Sonic. If I recall correctly, there was a presentation where he had a trailer and in the end he was like, oh yeah, Sonic, alright.
And yet, Sonic does show up in the Game Awards later, but it's with the Flipping Knuckles show. Again, that is something
we'll get to
about
it.
later.
Why don't you see, Joe? It's
But
because it's not a game, but a movie or a series.
Beautiful, simply beautiful. Again, we'll get to that later. But
What about your actual vote, Joe?
My actual vote, I gotta give it to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I know it's remake territory, but those remixes
not
are
just
so
that,
good.
because I can go easily there. It's getting also my vote. Let me put it in the simplest way possible, because even proudly presented in the marketing, Final Fantasy VII is literally unzipping his pants and exposing his gigantic schlong on this category, because the devs proudly said that they had like over 400 tracks of remixes. That requires a lot of work. And I can assure you, yes, the quality is actually there, including possibly my new favorite rendition of Clash on the Big Bridge. Yes, that the track that keeps on giving keeps getting new heights. Sure, the only track that I will say is questionable is that for some reason Masashi Amazu brought back the Metal the Chocobo from 13.2 for reason that puzzled me. I know that it has its fan, but I don't get you people. I'm sorry. But overall, it's complicated. I will give you a sample later. But compared to everyone else, this is not even a contest, because Astrobot has a perfectly fine score. It's actually very varied and interesting, including Ennio Morricone-inspired Western theme for its hub world, potentially. It's just about, competing with these guys. Refantazio's score is fine. Nothing that I really will remember. Compared to Persona 5, I argue it's a bit of a step down in terms of memorability, but it's still solid on its own. Stellar Blade is basically the same thing to me. Again, solid, nothing super memorable, but it's getting a bit elevated thanks to the crossover with the Automata. And I still instead argue...
Wow, it's being carried by Square Enix.
As per usual. It's happening also to Fantasia and Edge, if you forgot. But Silent Hill 2, if Sonic X Shadow was still present here, I argue Silent Hill 2 technically has a place here, because Akira Yamaoka's score for the original was legendary for this, particularly Promise Reprise, particularly a piano piece about it. And the fact that they were remade makes it kind of on the same ground as Rebirth. And again, to me, it makes it, appropriate to be here, despite the fact that it's still a remake. But I'm sorry, Rebirth just has both the quality and the quantity, so it's not even a contest. I'm sorry. What about you, Dej?
I gave it to Rebirth. I know I'm a hypocrite, but
and also, I'm sorry if you paid attention from previous year, Square Games has basically carried over this particular award for the past years non-stop almost. So there's that too.
Again, a reason to put Sonic in, that would at least be good competition. I wouldn't even be mad if Sonic loses, but come on, guys. The Sonic music is one thing that even when the series was a punching bag, people agreed was good, save for a few times.
Although, there is one major point Sonic X Shadow loses for.
Wow.
Hey, remember that trailer when they played a remix of Supporting Me?
Yeah.
In the actual game, there is no lyrics, so it's why'd you put that in the trailer?
Maybe there is a version on the official soundtrack.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is a soundtrack version that does have the lyrics involved.
Is this another Devil May Cry 5 situation where if you suck at the game, you don't hear the lyrics?
Not to my knowledge, because that's the thing. Everyone loved that Supporting Me remix, and it's good. But the fact that there is no vocals in it, despite the fact that the trailer had it, is so baffling.
Anyway, you were talking about audio design, Jova, which is the next category. What are the contestants?
We have Astrobot and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth again. And returning, Hellblade 2 and Silent Hill 2. And the newcomer is Call of Duty Black Ops 6.
That's the thing. Okay. From what I heard, it's perfectly fine as a game on its own. Compared to the slogs and, downs that Call of Duty has had, this one genuinely feels like a step up from those. But I'm sorry, what is it doing here?
Look, and look, I will give him credit. Apparently, Call of Duty finally got to that point of being so repetitive that the series was in trouble that Activision are apparently now starting to care more about the quality. Took them long
It
enough,
seems that Microsoft really was caring about this IP when buying the company.
but yeah, no, like Tio said, why is that particularly
I
in
think I
audio
talked about,
design?
because I think these Call of Duty game showed up also last year for this category. Again, it's important what this category is representing. Audio design is in sound effects. Where and when do you hear them? If there is a location-based audio, if you hear them behind you or something, creates that effect. But I'm sorry, compared to the other titles, Call of Duty just feels weak. In all places.
I'll admit. Well, with Astrobot, are we counting the sounds that maybe go on with the vibrations of the haptic feedback? In
Well,
which
technically,
case,
yes, because again, Astrobot has a lot of sound design quirks, particularly also including stuff like the songs, how they change depending on your distance between you and an object, particularly your console, for example, the GPU, the SSD, contributes to the lyrics of the main song as you actually get close to them if they're present inside the PS5. So that's actually kind of neat as a trick.
what is your pick, Tio?
I have to go with. I know it sounds weird, but I have to go with Senwa Saga because LA 2 because it's literally its selling point.
Okay. If I am to be fair, I recall seeing the behind the scenes videos of Heavenly Sword, and I do know that, assuming this is the same team, they took the sound design especially serious.
Not to mention, again, the entire point is for Senwa to actually hear the voices in their head, telling her, for example, where an attack is coming. So sound location is very important, and they have to recreate the effect of Senwa's, psychosis actually taking an effect on her. So I argue this is why these deserve better than the others. Again, outside of Call of Duty, everyone else seems to have something of merit as a result. I still maintain what I said for Final 7 Remake. Rebirth continues the proud tradition of having the sound effects of everything in combat being punchy as hell and absolutely satisfying. When you hit something, you feel the weight of your blow. Like I said, compared to Kingdom Hearts, where when Sora strikes the Keyblade, it feels more of a gentle tap, like tip, 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 tip. When Cloud actually swings his sword, you feel every single bam towards the target. It's so satisfying, But again, and Silent Hill 2, like Jova said, in the previous category, has the thing about capitalizing on the horror genre. With different sound designs for the monsters, and also a bit of location based where your partner is technically. But again, Hellblade 2 is technically on another category, and I argue it's the one that deserves this. Jova.
I'm gonna go with Astrobot. Again, most of these are good contenders. 7 Rebirth has, well, I will say this. 7 Rebirth has good audio design in the sense that it's the way I expect a game to have good audio design. Like, it textures everything well and good, but it does feel like part of the standards as opposed to, a standout. Which, now, to be fair, I will say, this is a me personally thing here. Yeah, horror games tend to have the advantages when they do their job with sound and audio design because, well, a lot of the horror does legit go into that sound and audio design, essentially. And Hellblade 2, again, I have made it no secret I'm not the biggest fan of Ninja Fury, but again, props where it's due. Despite how Heavenly Sword may have turned out, there were things to like about that franchise, and there was definitely a lot of work put in behind the scenes, notably with the audio design, essentially. But ultimately, the one that's the most fun to me is Astrobot with what it does with its audio here. And again, far be it from me to once again vote for Rebirth anyway, so yeah, Astrobot. You get my vote.
That's
I'm torn between Silent Hill 2 and Hellblade 2 because because if you screw up a horror game sound and audio, I'm sorry, then it's a sin unforgivable.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, it's why I feel that sometimes horror games may have a bit of an unfair advantage in that category because, well, it is legit the point of them.
Like I said,
to be
in this
above.
case, it's kind of the miracle and the damning at the same time with Silent Hill 2. Bloober Team, out of all of expectation that people had, managed to not screw this up. But as a result, people are just too, surprised by it, to actually, believe it's more than substantial merit.
And they did say that. It's like, no, we're dedicated to making good games now, so I want to believe them.
We'll have to see what the future holds. So, what about your actual vote?
I'll go with Silent Hill 2.
Alright then. Next
Next up.
Oh boy,
Best
performance. Awarded for individual for voiceover, acting, motion, and/or performance capture. And we do have Brianna White for her role as Aerith in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Hannah Telle for Life is Strange Double Exposure. I think she's Max, the protagonist. Humberly Gonzalez for the protagonist, if I recall correctly, of Star Wars Outlaws. Luke Roberts for the protagonist of Silent Hill 2 Remake. And Meina Jurgens for Senua in Senua Saga Hellblade 2.
I feel like some of these choices are a bit odd, admittedly not because of their performances, but sort of because of the games they came from, and as a result, feels like it takes down some of their performances. Again, not in the sense that the performances themselves weren't great, but I feel like the games didn't really allow them to perform as well as they could have. Now, I will admit, I have not looked too deep into Life is Strange 4, aka Double Exposure, but I'll admit, going off of previous Life is Strange games, Hannah Telle has never really struck me as the selling point of them, but hey, maybe she got better for that. Humberly Gonzalez for Star Wars Outlaws. Oh boy, that's an Ubisoft well of... Well, okay, Star Wars Outlaws...
I argue, is not the worst of that game's problems.
That is true, but again, I do wonder, were there not better performances? Again, it's not even that her acting was bad, it's just, I'll admit, for as much as I don't like how much they're repeating a lot of the big installments we got, well, they still are, Hellblade 2 and Silent Hill 2 and Rebirth are here. God, that's technically the majority, but this is where some of the ones that they chose are odd. Like Star Wars Outlaws, it's not the best, but even still, I feel like the performances weren't as emphasized as they could have been. It's a bit hard to explain, but if I were to put it in probably terms you've heard of before, if I'm comparing it to Red Dead Redemption 2, which yes, I know that's the foothold, but it feels like a lesser Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of the acting and what they actually do with stuff in there. That being said, Luke Roberts, yeah, he was good in Silent Hill 2. I just say he was good, though. Again, I don't even want to say he was bad, it's just, I'm like, really? These were the performances we went for? And of course, there's Melina Jurgens from Hellblade 2.
So what would you vote, Jova?
Gotta give it to Brianna White. Like, she has just been stellar from the get-go as Aerith and hasn't really been slowing down at all. She's a ton of fun in person, she's a ton of fun in character, essentially. She arguably brought Aerith back to her roots of, not being as innocent as the 7 franchise and Kingdom Hearts had portrayed Aerith as being. Hell, we literally get her cursing, which caused a whole generations of gamers to have a heart attack at realizing that Aerith is not as sweet and innocent as they thought.
Alright, what about you, Dej?
Well, okay, well, I did. There was one thing I do. I assume Luke Roberts is the one who voices James, right?
Yeah. And if I had to be honest, Dej, while his performance is technically fine, I kind of prefer Troy Baker from the PS3 re-release. Again, outside of the horrible graphical compartment that went into that travesty, they actually bothered to hire new voice actors for record all of the lines in game. And I argue Troy Baker was perfectly fine as James. I kind of wish they brought him back for this remake instead of getting TV actor, so we have an important name in the cast.
Yeah, what you said pretty much sums up my main frustration with these picks. It's like, most of these picks it feels like they did their job, but not in so much a standout way that I feel like they were the cream of the corn when it came to acting this year.
There is
Speaking
one
of
thing I'll give Luke credit towards, and it's when James says that he has to go back to his wife. It's like, oh, but I thought she died. Then she said, and James says, oh. But yeah, I'm good with Brianna White. Okay.
I'm gonna go instead with Melina Jurgens for a simple reason. Brianna White probably would have been a close second, but here it's just like the actual voice acting performance. Melina actually also performed mocap and has to represent the character of Senwa, and that goes an extra step into doing that, because compared to Arif, where her movement, even if she was actually mocap by Brianna, which I don't think it happened, but even in case, her movements are more simple. Senwa has to go through specific set of movements to represent, her psychosis and also the combat going on. It veers a lot into the whole scripting, but for the specific of these awards about the actual acting and performance, I think she has an edge over it, so she gets my vote.
All right, then. Speaking of which,
oh,
let's look into the next category, innovation and accessibility. Recognizing software and hardware that is pushing the medium forward by adding features, technology, and content to help games be played and enjoyed by an even wider audiences. And I already have to point out an elephant in the room here that I've never liked about this category. They mention the titles, but they never mention exactly what the titles did to make them stand out in accessibility. And I feel like this is most important where they should, because, again, just flashing a title doesn't mean we automatically know. Now, granted, one could say that's the case for almost anyone, but at least, with most of the stuff, it's like, you can look at a game, glimpse at it and go, okay, I get why this gameplay, this performance, or this art style did it. But with accessibility, you kind of really have to go out of your way to see if they did anything that special. And again, for all I know, the accessibility could have just been the usual toolbox of adjustable subtitle sizes or extremely descriptive nature, essentially.
Now, with the candidates we have technically two returning, although from different circumstances. We still have Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Star Wars Outlaws. Then we have Diablo 4, developed by Blizzard and published by Activision/Xbox. Then we have Dragon Age The Veilguard, developed by BioWare and published by EA. And
is this the only award that that game was getting?
And I argue it's one too much. And we have Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, developed by Ubisoft Montpellier and published by Ubisoft.
Do we have time to go into a little about just how much Dragon Age The Veilguard screwed the farm?
No, especially because it's kind of stepping over a landmine. So I'll just, sum it up very briefly by saying that, yes, it has, accessibility features that, reflect a bit the modern age. But it's inserviceable of a game where the gameplay was toned down. The writing feels childish in a lot of places and questionable at the very best, and the art style had a bit of a regression for I don't even know who to please, So a lot of veterans of the franchise are kinda going for the route of saying to Dragon Age 2 that they treated it too harshly. That's the effect this one is having. And from what I heard, this is still selling relatively fine. So it's not on a catastrophic level of bomb as stuff like, say, Dustborn or Concord. It's just that it's not doing the same numbers that the franchise had. So I do wonder what the future of BioWare is. As for the other titles, technically speaking, I don't know about a couple of ones, like Call of Duty. I have no idea what kind of accessibility features does it have. I know some stuff that Diablo 4 has, and Star Wars Outlaws, but I argue Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown has the edge to me because they were proudly presenting, in their trailers. They were very clear in explaining what they were doing, and they were, for the most part, trying to be in service of beating the game while being actually accessible for people who were in need, instead of being an instant push to win button like a lot of games tend to have, disguising that as an accessibility features. So again, it feels like it's genuinely trying to do. So that's why it gets my vote. Java.
Boy, I gotta say, each company in this category has some level of controversy going on. And I noticed that tends to be the case when it comes to the accessibility awards. It's almost like these are the only awards that they could win. But I digress. Much as I'm loath to give Ubisoft anything of positivity these days here, I'm going to give it to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown for similar reasons, that they were the most upfront with the accessibility in a way that didn't just feel like they were clout chasing. Like, it did feel like they legit wanted to bake it into a point where it helps people complete the game, but not in a way that feels too patronizing, if you catch my drift.
Yeah,
That's
I'm giving it to Lost Crown for a similar reason.
Next up, Games for Impact for a thought-provoking game with a pro-social meaning or message. Who do we have, Jova?
Closer the Distance from Osmotic Studios and Skybound Games, Indica from Odd Meter and 11-Bit Studios, Neva makes its return, as does Life is Strange Double Exposure from Deck9 under Square Enix, Hellblade 2 is here, and finally we have Tales of Kenzara Zao
All right,
by Certain Studios with EA.
Let's not cut too much of a bullshit Dej. Both you and me are voting for Tales of Kenzera.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, basically.
All right, then. There we go. Most of the others, I argue, do have a reason to be here. Not so much Life is Strange Out of Exposure, but that's a can of worms. Yes, audience, you haven't seen me in the Life is Strange commentaries, and for a very good reason, because my opinions tend to differ a lot with the rest of the group. But I argue Double Exposure is generally the first time they try to piss off the audience in some kind of manner. Hellblade 2,
Wow.
Hellblade 2, I argue, is perfectly qualified for this, but, doesn't have as much of an edge. Same goes for Neva. Indica has a bit of it, because it's a story technically talking about a very personal level, about, growing up in a heavy religious community and the impact that does it have, on a person. I don't remember much of Closer the Distance, if I have to be honest, so it's the one game that I don't know as much as the rest. But really, Tales of Kenzera really deserves it just for the amount of the effort that, the person who actually pushed it for, actually went through, to try to be genuinely something different, something that exposes, a foreign culture with a complete new IP. And the fact that, it did not manage to sell that much is a crime, if you ask me. I'm still planning on recording it eventually, so don't worry, Dej, you'll be the first in line.
Yeah.
And I will be there too.
And it really does suck that the development team got harassed by grifters.
That's unfortunately what you get these days for everything.
Mm-hmm.
It really basically molds it out, because you get on one hand the dev teams being harassed, and on the other the game journalist that sees this as a smoking gun and believes that every single criticism is associated automatically with that, and at the end of the day nobody's happy. Hooray! Yeah. What about you, Jova?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Tales of Kenzara as well, essentially. It's the game I'm most familiar with out of this bunch, essentially. And it's, well, okay, it speaks to me on something of a personal level, too. I do like the links and culture aspects that it goes into. The gameplay is, well, okay, to be fair, we're going more so for the impact, essentially. But I do feel like, overall, it's definitely possibly the most unique of the games here that would make the kind of impact from attracting people with the gameplay and then letting them get to see what's truly deep inside. I won't go too spoilery since we're going to eventually do a commentary anyway of it, but I highly recommend the game. Yes, this is in spite of the fact that it's an EA game, though to give EA credit, of the controversial studios, they have been surprisingly behaving themselves more compared to everyone else.
But remember, this is part of their indie program, and they've been treating the studios involved with, like, velvet gloves, to say the least. And I know
that is true.
Yeah, it's been heavily reported. Like, say what you want about EA as how they treat their staff. They treat everyone who's involved in these indie stuff like how they should be treating their employees.
Yeah, it really kind of sucks for their main team, like BioWare, again.
It's honestly kind of insane, though. You will get better treated by EA if you're an independent worker than somebody who works there. Like, that feels like such bizarre logic, but it is what it is.
Alright, next category is a bit of a doozy. Best ongoing, awarded for a game outstanding development of ongoing content that evolves the player's experience over time. We have, the only returning one is Diablo 4, as mentioned. And we have Destiny 2, developed by Bungie. And now this description tells me that now Destiny is properly a Sony IP, actually. I didn't know that, because now it's properly published by that. We even got a Destiny character bot in the recent update for Astrobot as a result, so it kind of makes sense. Then we have, of course, Final Fantasy XIV by Square Enix, Fortnite from Epic Games,
Of course.
and Helldivers 2 by Arrowhead Game Studios and Sony Computer Entertainment. And I have to be honest, go on, Drova.
Can I just say this? I am actually surprised Helldivers 2 was not one of the contenders for Game of the Year, honestly.
That's the thing, Drova. If you look around, I argue it shouldn't really be in this category either, because despite the huge success towards its beginning, and nowadays it's basically a bit better, in a better state, it had a massive drop towards the summer season for a couple of things that, developers did, including stuff like the whole PlayStation account being required, and a lot of hostility towards people, and again, it's overall just a mess, which is why I don't even think it deserves here. And again, as for the others, fuck it, I'm not voting for either Destiny 2 or Fortnite. I'll be dead before doing that, And Diablo 4 is technically fine, but I had to give it to Final Fantasy XIV. As I will explain, I think in one of the next few categories, Downtrail has been not really well received, and not for for all bad reasons. There are some legitimately good points to be against it, but compared to its competition, fuck it, it really stands out as usual.
You can't always have a hit.
It's complicated. I'll explain later.
I will say this.
Okay, this is gonna be my most shameless reason. With Fortnite, it had the TMNT, and also Theo, I think you can understand this. We saw Elastigirl's ass.
That's true. I get it, but at the same time, this really feels like, oh, there's popular character I recognize and I clapped. And for a game like Fortnite, I argue personally it shouldn't deserve it. Still vote for whatever you wish, but I will still judge you for it.
Never forget that Chun-Li is recognized more as a Fortnite character.
Shut up.
Because of
disgusting. all the while Team Sweeney actually doesn't bother to recognize the actual IPs that made Epic what it is now, like Unreal.
Yeah, that's actually disappointing.
You have to remember, Unreal, or Unreal Tournament as it's called, was the IP that Epic Games basically started its foundation with. It's very important because, it was the thing that the equivalent of Half-Life for Valve, And in recent times, they delisted all of them from all, digital stores and pretend they don't exist for some reason. Despite the fact...
it's like, guys, what are you going to do once that Fortnite well dries up?
And I know what some people may say, make Fortnite 2, but no, I feel
Fortnite... we saw how well they were for Overwatch.
Oh god, it still ain't going great. Okay, talking about Overwatch will probably lead to its own video, but Overwatch nowadays is trying to mooch off of Fortnite's formula. That's how well things are going.
But again, that's Deji's vote for Fortnite. What about you, Jova?
Okay, I'm gonna work down from least likely to most likely. Diablo 4, nope. I get it, Activision were getting better with Diablo 4. They also got up to some tomfoolery with Diablo 4, so, I ain't rewarding that. Although, Activision Blizzard, technically, but look, Blizzard is pretty much synonymous with Activision these days.
Been a while for a long time.
Destiny 2... God, Destiny 2 has been through one of the weirdest roller coasters of quality. First, it was under Activision's boot. Things were bad. Then it got out from Activision's boot. Things were looking up, but it lost a lot of the content and story material, essentially, to the point where some people had to ask, why bother? And nowadays, it's hard to say. It's a mess, is what it mostly is, but it's I can't recommend getting into Destiny 2 at this point. It feels like the well has been poisoned at this point.
And really, Bungie should just move on if they're not bleeding even more people. The thing is, the marathon game that they're making is also not particularly interesting, if you ask me.
Yeah, because it's going to be another multiplayer game instead of being a normal single player.
It's actually an extraction game like Tarkov, but yes, it's multiplayer focused.
It's like, guys, I already had the joke years back about how much they were really, really trying to get people into Destiny 2, but at this point, I think the game's time has passed. There's a player base, but is it really alive, though? Like, maybe you could try and recoup your losses with a Destiny 3 at this point. Then you could probably go back to having the narrative and the multiplayer stuff. But yeah, no, I ain't voting for Destiny 2. That game had its chance, and I feel like its time is coming. In the worst way. Next, Helldivers 2. Again, I was kind of surprised that it wasn't a Game of the Year contender. Now, I do get the logical reason that Tio mentioned why it wouldn't be, but when has logic ever stopped the Game Awards? But I digress, though. Helldivers 2 was a gigantic success that turned out to be an honest-to-God sleeper hit, essentially. It was something people weren't particularly paying attention to, but when it got going, oh boy, it dominated the internet. Until it didn't. Yeah, that little snag with the Sony stuff.
Trust, Jova, trust me, I need you to save that for our next category.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Okay. Moving on, no, I ain't doing Helldivers 2. Now, Fortnite. As of this year, I have actually started playing Fortnite, and I will say this.
Shame.
Yes. Okay, look, I will say this. I never was on the Fortnite hate bandwagon. I definitely poked fun at it, and I'll admit, I did scuff at the idea of it as a crossover, since ultimately it is just skins you're playing as. Having played it now, I get it. I totally get it. Just the absolute craziness of what you can do with all these characters in it. Yeah, it's a cheap reason to be appealed to it, but it's a nice reason, essentially. Like, the game is legit fun. That being said, it has its issues. First of all, Fortnite just absolutely spoils the OGers, the people who will throw a fit if they dare to bring back any content from the old battle passes because they want to feel super special by having the original content. The problem is, this includes collab characters who have been locked behind Battle Pass stuff for years. I'm sorry, but it is player hostile to not allow people who, for whatever reason, didn't check the game out years ago, essentially, may not have even been old enough to play it at that point. Like, look, when Halo Infinite can boast that it has a more player-friendly way to get back old Battle Pass content or something than you, there's a problem. Yeah. And again, while I do like Fortnite, I'll admit, it definitely does need to reboost itself in some of these new gameplay modes. Rocket Racing is practically dead in the ground. Festival arguably only worked out as well as it did because of all the music and whatnot.
And hey, remember when they tried to copy Among Us and failed miserably?
And you know what? I do get it. Like, Fortnite at its core is this and that. But I feel like it does need to get better with the community here and there. Also, they need to get a shop that doesn't rely on FOMO. That is the biggest problem with Fortnite. Even while they're trying to improve, they are highly, highly dedicated to the fear of missing out, because their shop is one that cycles, essentially. I can get it for some collabs, but it's clear that they do this because they know people will immediately get V-Bucks for something that has not been there for a while, since rarity is sadly something that motivates a lot of purchases for what are essentially cosmetics or stuff. I don't fall for a lot of that stuff. I'm very frugal with what I do on that game here and there. But yeah, that's it. Fortnite is a lot of good fun, but they are not the best for their community. That is why my vote will go to Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not going to act like it's always been perfect, but Final Fantasy XIV feels like just the game, at least out of this bunch, that respects its player base the most, essentially.
I'm gonna tell you more in the next category, Jova.
Okay, maybe I'm setting myself up for that, but I guess out of these five, as
obviously.
far as I know,
that's
it
the
feels
reason
like
for my voting as well. Best community support. Recognizing a game for outstanding community support, transparency, responsiveness, inclusive of social media activity, and game updates, patches. We have returning Final Fantasy XIV, Fortnite, Helldivers 2, and incoming we have Baldur's Gate 3 by Larian Studios, and, of course, No Man's Sky by Hello Games. The interface with all of this. Both Helldivers 2 and Final Fantasy XIV do not, and I mean do not, deserve this award in the slightest. Helldivers 2 had that kind of snag, but 14 is a bit more tricky, and I don't want to step on too many landmines. Let me put it this way. While Yoshi P was making Final Fantasy 16, he basically reshuffled a bit the localization team. And I forgot her name. One of the new people that got involved with had a bit of an attitude, shall we say. She still has because she's still there. But basically, she kind of went through against the principle that 14 had since Around Reborn, as in listening to player feedback. Because Yoshi P was like, if a player feedback tells me something about a character, I need to do something about it. This Karen instead went like, if I recall, there's even a quote that there's something like, if someone is saying, I don't like this character, I'm like, no, you are wrong. Which is honestly the worst attitude you can have. And this got reflected in Dawn Trail, particularly in the, not necessarily in the way it was translated, because that's kind of part of the course of 14. That one was technically, still part of the course of that, so I don't have a problem with that. But it felt like they were really pushing towards a Poochie situation where the new hip character introduced, I will not say what this character is called, but if you know the game, you know who I'm talking about, would be pushed up front and center for your player character to school, except that this new player character is not well written. They're going through basically a journey of learning how to be a hero themselves, of course. But the problem is that the game focuses way too much to talking to this character and discovering the new land you've been in, like the new everything that Dawn Trail has been doing. And again,
you mentioned this woman being part of the localization team. Is it a case where the character is better in the original translation?
Not so much. I argue the delivery of the voice acting, not so much to give a diss to the VA that they chose for this character, for the English dub. It really doesn't matter. But I argue the Japanese version sounded a bit better, which is nothing that I didn't really say much about 14 as a whole. My point is that I do feel that Dawn Trail feels to me like the expansion that was influenced more by, let's just say, Western influence towards Square Enix. Yeah, so that's why I don't think it deserves what I vote, because community support has been dwindling in the past months, ever since launch of Dawn Trail. I still don't think it's the worst thing that has happened to the game. We're still fine for the most part, and people are blowing a gas can, and of course people are taking the occasion to be harassing and transphobic, because of course they are. But I don't think the game is completely flawless as a result. It's not one opposite, but it's not the other either. So, Fortnite already explained why I wouldn't vote that. Baldur's Gate 3 has been very welcoming with the free updates, but if I recall correctly, Larian Studios is kind of done and he's moving on to the next project, which is understandable because the game is massive and requires a lot of work, so they deserve the success and the money they got, and now they can, at the very least, rest for a while before working on the next point. But I'm sorry, at the cost of being a basic bitch, No Man's Sky deserves it once again, because Sean and Hello Games just keep going. It's like
it's the redemption story of the ages,
and it never stops. That's the thing; it never stops. Every year we find them back here. It's like a friend when you keep saying at the year party, and it always feels like warm and fuzzy as a feeling. Like, goddamn, that deserves recognition as a result. So that's why it's getting my vote. Jova.
Yeah, it's okay. For me, it's definitely a competition between Baldur's Gate 3 and No Man's Sky. Helldivers 2, we already mentioned why. Like, and I just don't get it with Helldivers 2. You guys were on top of the world, but you threw it away on the gamble. The gamble that people would love your game so much that they would go, yes, please, we will take this absolute crappening upon our souls, essentially, by forcing that stupid Sony sign up, essentially. It boggles the mind. And yeah, Final Fantasy XIV, that might have been my contending until Tio mentioned it. Again, I'll admit, while I do follow Final Fantasy XIV, I don't play it in depth, so I'm not as up to date with what's going on here. Fortnite, I am up to date with that. And while, again, the devs have done stuff, and I get it, maybe some of the content that they can or can't bring back might be up to licensing stuff. But no, the actual base game stuff is like, seriously, Rocket Racing needs help. Lego mode is just a means to an end, essentially, to grind XP, essentially. The two modes you will, at least the ones I mostly play, are, of course, the Battle Royale and the Festival mode, with the creative maps here and there, but there's a lot they could do, and maybe they'll get to it, but they don't always seem to listen the most. To give them credit, they do feel like they're on the uptick and getting better. But yes, it comes down between Baldur's Gate 3 and No Man's Sky. And as we mentioned, Baldur's Gate 3 was just amazing with how in touch with the community they got. Like, even like fan-made videos like those from the Mass channel had the participation of the voice actors, and like they felt very transparent with how the development process was going, which honestly made it so that I don't think anyone, well, okay, there were some complaints, but most people were a-okay with them sweeping the Game Awards last year because they did feel legit that earned in each category.
Like I mentioned, I always appreciated that they even included as bonus videos. Not, I don't think in the game, but at least on the YouTube channel, the actual outtakes that both the but especially the narrator actually had, which I think something that more game studios should have just for fun.
I think my only issue with their inclusion here is this a bit late for an edition? Because were they really doing that much more with the game this year that we needed to put them on?
I argue, yes. They have been having regular updates. So they just released, a few months ago, tops, the latest one, which is the last one as far as I know. But they worked their asses off, and they were all free updates. So yes,
is fair.
They would be deserving this, technically.
And I pit them against No Man's Sky because, yes, while it had a rough start, like Tio mentioned, No Man's Sky is one of the most well-put examples of how you maintain community support. How you let the fans know you're sorry for messing up and treating them nothing but like royalty. Like, they are still going, and the additions are incredible. Like, honestly, part of me does kind of want them to eventually move on to making proper a new game, but on the other hand, I do have to appreciate the dedication they have here, and the fact that because of that dedication, this game has made them so much money that they've been able to basically live off of this one game, which is insanely incredible. So that in mind, while I would not mind if either Baldur's Gate 3 or No Man's Sky won, I'm gonna have to give it to Baldur's Gate 3, if only because Baldur's Gate 3 really took things up a notch, essentially. Like, if I had to come up with a very, very, very nitpicky reason to give it over No Man's Sky, it would be, well, A, No Man's Sky is won so many times at this point, might as well give someone else more of a chance, and B, I guess to give Baldur's Gate 3 credit, it had a better start, like, in the sense that the game that released wasn't a mess, unlike No Man's Sky. But again, that's very nitpicky, because No Man's Sky is the bee's knees these days. I want to make that clear. But yeah, Baldur's Gate 3.
Dash, what about you?
So, I'm really tied between No Man's Sky and Baldur's Gate 3. I want to give it to 3 because of how they got screwed, despite winning a lot last year. That Game of the Year speech that they wanted to make got cut short, unfortunately.
Please wrap it up.
Because they didn't want to repeat.
Like, no, you guys deserve to go up on stage and talk about your game as long as you need to.
Especially since there were
I will
others
never. That's
touched
the one thing I will never complain about the Game Awards. Is like, you guys work your asses off these games. Talk about it.
Alright, so is that your vote, Dej?
Yeah, I'm just gonna I'll give it up to Baldur's Gate 3.
Next up, we have Best Indie for outstanding creative technical achievement in a game made outside the traditional publisher system. Returning, we have, oh, look at that, it's Balatro and Neva. The newcomers are Animal Well, developed by Share Memory and published by Big Mode. Lorelei and the Eraser Eyes, developed by Simogo and published by Annapurna, and UFO 15, developed and published by Mossmouth. I don't know much about these last ones, so I cannot tell.
Okay, so actually, I can explain this. Are you familiar that whenever, like, your parents, probably back in the day, they bought you a game that had 50 games in one?
Yeah.
That's basically what UFO 50 is, except they're all full-fledged games with a lot of effort put into it.
All right.
Instead of the Cheetah Man situation.
Mm-hmm. I'm a bit torn between Neva and Lorelei and Laser Eyes. Both of them, I argue, are kind of worthy. Neva, I argue, is a bit better of the art style and the gameplay. Lorelei and Laser Eyes has a bit of a better story, if you ask me. So I guess I'm gonna go with Neva in the end. But I kind of wish, I would have been able to vote also for Lorelei in another, category, because I think Crocodile is the only one. Animal Well is technically fine, but not on the level of these two, and I'm glad of that, because I will be dreading if I had to vote for something that Video Game Donkey is involved.
Okay, can I talk about that real quick? When the game was getting glowing reviews, a lot of people were praising Donkey more than the actual game developers.
The person who gives money for the publishing.
Yeah, it's like it kind of feels a bit disingenuous with all due respect.
That being said, Edge, what is your vote?
I'm gonna to UFO 50 because I have never seen my timeline talk. Well, between that and Melantro, my timeline is like, this game is good. This game is good. This game is good.
Jova.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with UF50 as well. Like, UFO 50 goes into great depths to make this feel like a retro game of that ilk, to the point where these are all brand new games, mind you, but they give them fictional years of release, essentially.
That being said, the two games that I think should have been here, one was Nine Souls, which I mentioned before, and the other, no, it's not too much of a game, but I argue could have been here. It's called Thank Goodness You're Here, which, is a British made, which is extremely British. But again...
With a name like that, that does sound British.
But again, I understand most of the other categories. For once, Balatro really fits at home in here, for example. Alright,
speaking of indie games,
the debut indie game for the best debut created by the studio. Returning, we have Animal Well, Balatro, and that's it. Then we have Manor Lords by Slavic Magic and published by Hooded Horse. Pacific Drive, developed by Ironwood Studios and published by Captain Interactive. And, what gets my vote in advance, The Plucky Squire, developed by All Possible Futures and published by Devolver Digital.
I feel like A Plucky Squire definitely had the most notable budget of these. Not saying that that's automatically
because Devolver money drove it's
Devolver, and also it was James Turner was the director, the guy who designed a lot of Pokemon stuff since Gen 5. Well, actually, since he designed Shadow Lugia.
That being said, I argue most of the others are, well contenders for this. I don't have any ill will towards them. It's just that I argue Plucky Squire is on a bit better level. Jova?
Yeah, Plucky Squire gets my vote easily. Like, it's not even a knock against the other games. It's just Plucky Squire is the one that intrigued me the most and definitely appears the most fun in that regard. It's a very unique concept as well, involving 2D art style gameplay with some 3D stuff, which, mind you, cannot have been easy.
This should have been nominated for best art style.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, might as well ask, why wasn't this in
We've been having this, unfortunately, for a couple of years by this point. Geoff and his cronies just do not learn a lot of things.
It's funny because Geoff was asking, what do you think was the biggest snub this year? It's like, bro, not helping.
Alright, what about you, Dej?
Plucky Squire was like my most anticipated game of last year. I was sad I got delayed, but it's like money, so I haven't had the chance to play it yet. But I still want it because look at it. It's just I love James Turner's artwork. I follow him on Twitter. If you want to know how big of a fan I am of James's art,
So I guess in the meantime, it's the one that gets your vote.
yes.
All right then.
So it's a unanimous one.
Next is best mobile game, or of course the best game playable on a mobile device. Thanks for the redundancy. Returning, we only have Balatro, but also we have AFK Journey, developed by Farlight and powered by DD Games. Pokemon TCG Pocket, developed by Creatures Inc. and the Pokemon Game Company. Wolverine Waves, developed and supplied by Kuro Games. And of course, we need a Hoyoverse contender, Zenless Zone Zero in this. I'm gonna be very, very honest and brief about this Pokemon TCG, mostly because I've actually installed it on day one, and as someone who didn't really follow much of a Pokemon TCG on an actual gameplay level outside of collecting, it's really good at teaching you to play the game in a very basic manner. So I really appreciate, how it does. It's a very good contender towards stuff like Yu-Gi-Oh, Master Duel. So that's actually pretty neat.
Tio, I just want to say I'm glad you didn't say Zenless Zone Zero because I would have posted the Shane GIF.
You know me better. I'll be dead before I vote something from Hoyoverse. Like I said, the art style that they use and the 3D modeling they use. It's what a lot of AAA games should be using instead of photorealism. But at the end of the day, it's just literally about the cheap propaganda to fill in China's coffers. And again, I wish more people would get it. Sure, if you still want to play the game, it's your choice, but at least know what you're getting into. Recently, they fucking built a fucking nuclear reactor with the money that they got from Genshin Impact. It's
what?
I don't remember if it was strictly just Genshin or also Honkai, but yes, the money that Hoyoverse is actually gaining are basically contributing to the development of the country. Again, this is. And I cannot approve 100% of this, especially when I have something better to vote, in this case, Pokemon TCG.
Okay.
Go on, what about you, Dej?
I do want to play TCG. So it's like I can finally get into the TCG without spending an arm and a leg.
What about you, Jova?
I would normally have said Zenless Zone Zero because it has a lot of fun aspects to it, some great character designs, and an interesting battle system. The problem is, well, the Hoyoverse controversies and all that. Not to mention the fact that Genshin got in trouble for their lack of characters of color to the point where they were literally whitewashing characters who are supposed to be of color and all that. Oh yeah, they recently got caught with their pants down on that, and yes, their customization option apparently addresses that. But yeah, Hoyoverse can eat a dick. I'm just gonna vote for Pokemon Trading Game Pocket, essentially.
Right. Next up, best VR/AR for the best game experience playable in virtual and augmented reality, irrespective of platform. And to be fair, we have all newcomers. We have Arizona Sunshine Remake by Vertigo Games, Asgard's Wrath 2, developed by Sanzaru Games, the guy behind this Life is in Time, Batman Arkham Shadow, developed by Camouflage, Metal Hellsinger VR, developed by Lab 42 or The Outsider, and Metro Awakening from Vertigo Games, again, company specializing in doing VR port. I argue a couple of these have more of an edge than others, particularly, again, Asgard's Wrath has been a decent enough, series that Sanzaru is making, again, for VR, for the VR standards that they have. Metal Hellsinger feels a bit of a cheap because it's basically a port, kinda, which just takes advantage of a VR aspect to it. And I have to give credit, however, Batman Arkham Shadow is genuine step up from the previous Batman Arkham VR title. Instead of being a glorified tech demo, this is an actual game with an actual story that is a direct follower to the Arkham Origins duology.
Roger Crooksmith reprises as well as Batman. Right?
Yes, it's really consistent. And finally, we have a Batman Arkham game with Ratcatcher in it after being, mentioned only in all the other games. So again, they do try to build meat about it. So that's why it gets my vote. Asgard 2.
Apparently, Joe Chill is also in this game.
Mhm.
Like Batman disguises himself as Matches Malone,
Yeah.
and he's talking to and like during the therapy session, Joe Chill is there, and he doesn't know that's.
It also follows some of the plot point from Origins, like for example, Anarchy is still in it. Again, Asgard's Wrath 2 would have got my vote otherwise, but again, Batman Arkham Shadow gets my vote. Jova.
Easily Batman Arkham Shadow. Like, first off, a sequel to Arkham Origins, a game that I always said was better than Knight before that became the cool thing to say, essentially. Not necessarily because of Knight's own issues, but I've always felt like Origins was overlooked for just how good its story was, because, yeah, this may be a bit
because
of a hot
of the
take.
Joker stuff.
Well, not just that, but also Batman's relationship with Alfred, a lot of the early look into a lot of his foes and whatnot, essentially. Like, Arkham Origins feels like a very good look into the psyche of Batman without doing the lazy deconstructive thing of saying, oh, Batman's only a problem. He's the cause of all this, yada, yada, yada. I will say this, and maybe this is still a hot take, but I think these days we can come to terms with the fact that Origins has a better story than City. And mind you, I'm saying this as somebody who absolutely loves City. City did not have the best story, though. Like, you had a lot of moments that needed to happen just for the plot's sake. And while as much as I love the Freeze boss battle, the lead into it is just the characters being insanely dumb, essentially. Like, Origins feels great, so getting a sequel to it was a step up, and surprise, surprise, the story here is pretty good itself here. The fact that, they made Ratcatcher of all things. Now, I would bet good money that a lot of that is due to the fact that James Gunn's The Suicide Squad movie made Ratcatcher more of a household name, essentially, which, bit of a mixed
You know what? Sure, you have like 80 years of characters, might as well use them.
You know what? Yeah, for as questionable as it is due to it being like, the movie's kind of calling the shots here, I do appreciate that a lesser known villain is getting the spotlight, essentially. And hey, if you like your classics, they're back. They brought back Troy Baker as Joker, who I feel did improve on his Mark Hamill impression in this game, essentially.
Which was approved by Mark Hamill himself, anyway, so it has basically an approval goal on that matter.
They got Elijah Wood in as Dr. Jonathan Crane. That was...
What?
Yeah, they got Elijah Wood in there. That was certainly a pick.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Dwight Schultz as Arnold Wesker, the ventriloquist. That was an interesting one as well. No, they got a pretty good cast here. A lot of them returning from Origins, essentially. And Arkham Shadow, just in general, is a great addition to the mythos, essentially. If you're not into the VR gameplay, essentially, then, well, I guess you can probably just look it up on YouTube, since I do recommend at least checking out the story. The story is definitely what puts this over the edge for me, since, this may come as a shock, but I'm not usually a fan of VR games, really.
Alright, what about you, Dej?
Yeah, Batman.
Alright, next, best action game. For the best game in the action genre, focused primarily on combat, and we have almost all returning: Black Myth Wukong, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Stellar Blade, and the newcomer Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. I have to say, I'm kind of torn between Stellar Blade and Black Myth. Both of them have, good arguments on their own. Black Myth Wukong technically has more content and more of a budget put into it, but I'm gonna go with Stellar Blade at this point, just because I think it deserves one award. I'm sorry for Space Marine 2, but that one is more of a, Gears of War clone, so as a result the action is a bit even slower than, the Souls-like typical action as a result. And obviously I'm not gonna consider even much about Black Ops 6 or Helldivers 2 on the matter. Jova.
Yeah, this one's easily Stellar Blade for me. There are some good contenders here, but Stellar Blade just feels the most nicely well put, efficient, and just good snappy gameplay that I
The one that actually feels like an action game.
Well, Black Myth Wukong, I argue, also feels like an actual action game.
But yeah, Stellar Blade gets my vote.
Dej?
I will pick up Stellar Blade when it's not $70, and when the Nier DLC is out.
Fair enough. It's also coming to PC anyway. Next, we have Best Action Adventure. Best Action Adventure game combining combat with traversal and puzzle solving. Again, remember that. We have returning Astrobot, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, the Silent Hill 2 remake, Star Wars Outlaws, and the newcomer, The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, developed by Grezzo and published by Nintendo. I'm gonna go with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, actually. Astrobot is perfectly solid on its own, but like I said, it's more intended for a young to teen crowd. So outside of specific challenges that are meant to be very tough as balls, and even then, with minor practice, if you play Mario Galaxy, you'll know exactly what you're getting into. Most of the game is basically more played out for you. Not necessarily it plays itself, but it lays the foundation enough to be more comfortable for you. Silent Hill 2 remake, creates new instances of the puzzle while proposing also old ones, so it has more stuff that I argue makes it qualified for this. Star Wars Outlaws has content, but the problem is that the execution is faulty because of the performance and the graphical compartment. And The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom would be having an edge, especially because the first Zelda game where you actually play as actually Zelda, But I argue Lost Crown has a better edge to it. Dutch.
Okay, so I actually my biggest regret this year is not getting the Lost Crown, because everything I've seen looks so good. It's like, oh wow, it's just Metroid Dread, but with a higher budget, because you could play on your PS5 and it'll be at 120 frames per second, allegedly. So I'm gonna give it to that. Echoes of Wisdom, I do want to get, but I'm waiting to play it on the Switch too.
Yeah. Java, what about you?
I'm gonna vote for the game where you use IKEA furniture to save the day.
Fair enough.
The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Good game, nice unique concept. Zelda finally getting to do her thing, and yes, you can beat the bad guy using furniture.
Alright.
What isn't to love?
Next, we have Best RPG for the best game design with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences. Returning, we have Shadow of the Erdtree, 587 Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Metaphore Fantasio, and the newcomer, Dragon's Dogma 2, developed and self-published by Capcom.
I know we've said it before, and we've said it again, but putting the DLC option for Best RPG, again, it's literally just an extension of Elden Ring, essentially.
Which is why I'm gonna, basically, me and the rest of us, if I had to guess, we're gonna ignore it. If I had to vote Dragon's Dogma 2, I would want to vote it just to give it something, because if I calculate, it's the only award it is nominated for. But again, I had to give it to 7 Rebirth just because it has this amount of content in it that is just so damn satisfying, including the entire questline of Gilgamesh. Again, that alone easily makes it a recommendation from me on my part. Drova.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Rebirth as well. The fact that you can basically get payback against Yuffie for all the pain and suffering she put you through in the original 7 by basically forcing her to practically beg to join your team.
Oh, you can? Interesting.
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, actually, because the way she joins your party is not as immediate as you think. The story makes it work, so that both her and the team have to work out for it.
Like, if you play your cards right, she'll be begging for it. But yeah, like Teal mentioned, Rebirth just has so much packed into it. It's easily the most fun experience out of this bunch for me.
Dej.
There's a part of me that wants to give it to Dragon's Dogma 2 as Itsuno's swan song to Capcom. Yeah. But like, no. And from what I've seen of the customization, it's really, really good. That you could actually make real life people, which is kind of scary, but also cool. But then everything I've seen of Rebirth just looks, damn. You know what? I'll give it to Rebirth.
All right.
Unanimous.
Next up, oh, goody.
Best fighting game for the best design primarily around head-to-head combat. Our nominees are Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Spike Chunsoft / Bandai Namco, Grand Blue Fantasy versus Ryzen, Arc System Works / Cygames, the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics, published by Capcom, Multiverses, Player First Games, Warner Brother Games, Tekken 8, Bandai Namco. Let's address the elephant in the room.
You can do it. You actually
invited
can.
Marvel.
First of
Yay,
all,
you can do it. You actually can put all fighting games in the
instead of having a
category.
beat 'em up randomly. Well, to be fair, Jova, the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection includes the Punisher beat 'em up as showcased. So,
But at least at its base, it's fighting games.
still,
stuff,
that is a
but,
point.
yeah.
It really shouldn't be here because, despite the quality of life improvement, it really just
It's a collection.
It really just a game with minimal tweaking. So it's not, I wouldn't even call them addition because yes, you can find play as Norimaru. Cool, I guess. We could have done it with emulation in the first place. My point is that it's not a fault of the game itself, it's just that it doesn't deserve this award in particular for this year.
Yes.
The Multiversus arguably has a bit better of an edge because it actually updated its content as it goes on. I would argue that the characters that have been added recently have not been completely stellar. Stuff like Beetlejuice was interesting, although they were trying to capitalize obviously on the new movie. But stuff like Nubia, the DC character Nubia, really felt kind of out of nowhere and that not many people were asking for it.
They recently added Raven, and it's like, this is a character that should have been here from the start.
Like, okay, I'll be honest, Multiverses has some top-notch gameplay. Like, they're trying to make a Smash killer. It is not going to beat Smash any day, but it is a Smash killer that does feel like it could contend with Smash. I'm not sure what Nickelodeon are doing, since they seem to be just twiddling their thumbs with Nick All-Stars Battle Royale.
Isn't that game's? I don't think that game's DLC is finished yet.
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. But again,
like, is Iroh out yet?
I don't remember.
Like, the thing is, they've been eerily quiet about that game when they should be striking while the iron is hot. Like, that's something I have to give Multiverses to. That being said, one thing it pales in comparison with Smash, and no, I'm not talking about the roster, is, well, actually getting the characters, since Multiverses wants to be a fighting game, but also a blatant games as a service type of game, because there is a grind when it comes to unlocking characters. There is a grind when it comes to the battle passes, essentially. And it's either do that or fork over some dough to get through it, especially if you're trying to get it in a certain amount of time.
If it wants to survive, it needs to either change the tune a bit better or to make an actual, not offline version, but, a proper retail version instead, which I know they probably won't do it. That being said, the other three contenders, I argue, do stand out on their own. Tekken 8 gameplay is very satisfying, even if it had, not the most peak super roster that all fans wanted, even with its DLCs. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, it's technically another updated version of a previous title, but it has the advantage of, the 2D to 3D, kind of art style, similar a bit to the classic stuff that Arc System does, But I'm sorry, I have to give it, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is just that satisfying. It's the Budokai Tenkaichi 4 we should have got years ago, and it's so damn satisfying. I'm very looking forward to all the DLC characters to also experience. Sure, the meta online is not the most favorable to go with. Surprisingly, Yajirobe was actually the top tier for a while.
Oh god, every time he goes for the snack.
But in general, as a whole, it's just that fun to play, including making the what-if scenarios.
Those were awesome.
I think that Rivals 2 should have been the platform nominator. Platform for actually being nominated. Because Multiversus won last time.
Yeah, again, it's part of why it feels kind of cheap to be here.
Yeah. Sparking Zero, it's the game that people have been asking for years. Like, I remember back in the day when Fighters was first announced, people were like, where's Budokai Tenkaichi 4?
It was probably developed because of that, especially also because I remember Spike Chunsoft basically used a lot of skeletal animations from Jump Force to do this, so they basically recycled part of their past works. If anything, I kind of wish this kind of level of attention and roster size was done for Jump Force. But again, that's
I'm sorry, it's not Dragon Ball.
It's a topic for another time. What is your vote?
Grand Blue Fantasy Rising versus Rising. I am glad that this game has another chance to shine, considering when the original came out, the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
But Tekken's my favorite fighting game franchise, so I have to give it to that, even if it has its own can of worms.
Fair enough.
Right now.
What about you, Jova?
Okay, Multiverses. I would maybe give this to Multiverses, despite the fact that it's back again. If it weren't for the fact that that game's a little too grindy still. It's not the worst, but it's definitely a grind that they need to fix if they don't want to hemorrhage players in the long run. Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Okay, let's try and look past the fact that this is nothing but re-releases. And some people were arguing Sonic X Shadows shouldn't get in because that game's half a release. Like, come on. When we have this game, which is just all that. Mind you, these are good re-releases, touched up and everything, and now people can do some stuff that was only possible with emulation, despite how common that was, officially. But it's re-releases, like... It's frustrating because, on the one hand, yes, they did such a good job, but it feels weird rewarding, essentially, what amounts to, oh, here's my old homework from 10 years ago. I'll just resubmit it, essentially, and get an A+ again.
Sheen, this is the 7th time you presented Marvel vs. Capcom.
Grand Blue Fantasy, not really my thing. So yeah, my vote goes to Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. It's just the complete package. Yes, it is unbalanced, but that's kind of the point of the Budokai Tenkaichi series, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Alright then, next up, again, we have Best Family. Not the best game for the family, just Best Family. For the best game appropriate for family play, irrespective of genre or platform. Returning, we have Astrobot and Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. Newcomers are Princess Peach Showtime, developed by Goodfield, published by Nintendo. Super Mario Party Jamboree, developed by Nintendo Cube and published by Nintendo, and returning, I forgot to mention, also the Plucky Squire. First of all, congratulations on having been 2 contenders that are not Nintendo themed. Also, I would want to vote Super Mario Party Jamboree, but let's be honest, that is the game that tears apart families instead of actually being appropriate for them. So my vote instead goes for Astrobot, because I argue, yes, that one is definitely about the family. The kid enjoys properly the game as it goes on as a platform is that. The parent, whoever they are, recall the actual past IPs of PlayStation and they explain that to the kid. So it's a good balancing kind of thing.
Okay, so I'm gonna be rude here. Why the hell is Peach Showtime here? Who remembered that? Really?
I think it was just fine. Not really worth for this category because of the other contenders, but just fine.
Like, I do remember the hype for it, but after it came out, I remember the main contention being it's fine overall at best.
It's
apparently
baby's first adventure/action game.
Which, maybe that is Peach's identity, have the easier adventures if her first game is anything to go off of, but... I feel like they could have done more with it, honestly.
Yeah. So what's your vote, Dej?
Well, I'm gonna give it to Astrobot, even though Mario Party should ruin families.
And that's a good thing.
Also, I feel like we could have swapped out Peach for Sonic, or if we need another Mario game, the 1,000-Year Door remake.
Well, what about you?
What you said about Astrobot actually is a good deconstruction of how each member of the family could apply to it in that regard. Now, if I were to look at this in the sense of what's the best thing for family to play together, I'd probably give that to Super Mario Party Jamboree since that is legit just you guys all faffing around. But I will say this, hopefully your familiar bonds are strong, because otherwise that game's gonna ruin you. Worse than Monopoly does. Yeah, I'll give it to Astrobot. If only because Tio's description does actually go into a good degree where kids can enjoy it, adults can use it to reminisce, and probably still enjoy it as well. Fun for the whole family, without anyone having to suffer. As much fun as that can be in Mario Party.
Next up, we have Best Team Strategy. Best game focused on real-time or turn-based simulation strategy gameplay, irrespective of platform. Returning, we have Manor Lords. Newcomers are Age of Mythology Retold by World Edge and Forgotten Empires developed by Xbox Game Studios. Frostpunk 2, developed and developed by 11-bit Studios. Kunitsugami, Path of the Goddess, developed and developed by Capcom. And Unicorn Overlord, developed by Vanillaware and published by Sega/Atlus. Let me start with very quick just to mention. Age of Mythology Retold really doesn't have much of a place here because it's just, an upscale version of the original game. So what we said basically about the Marvel's Capcom Collection applies here. And why wasn't Unicorn Overlord nominated for our direction? Why does Vanillaware Games continue to not be nominated for our direction? Are you fucking high? That being said, I kind of want to vote for Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess just because of the amount of care that Capcom actually put into that game for the aesthetic, the gameplay, the type of story. We even have actually a Bunraku theater play, basically a puppet-like play that explains the premise of the game, and it's pretty good. I really recommend you seeing the video on YouTube if you want. Otherwise, I would have voted for Unicorn Overlord.
Is it bad that I didn't know that this game was out already?
Which one?
Kunitsugami.
The marketing has been present, but not as much as you would hope for. But it was present in some of the video game showcases, like the Capcom showcase, for example, of the summer. What about you, Dej?
So from what everyone has been telling me, Unicorn Overlord is a must-buy. Same thing with 13 Sentinels. But, is Kunitsugami actually like Onimusha?
No, it's more akin... Okay, people deemed it as a tower defense, but it's not that. It's more of an action game that incorporates some of that element.
Okay. It's on my pack, on my list, because I did see the trailer. It's like, oh, look, this looks cool.
Alright.
Plus, you can never say no to a new IP, but I'll give it to Unicorn Overlord.
Java.
Unicorn Overlord. It's the one I'm most familiar with, and it's pretty much a good... I guess it's a good jack of all trades in regards to the sim strategy thing. It's got the good art style, it's got the good gameplay. It's kind of basic in that regard, but it works with what it has to a point where it feels like it excels at that, if you catch my drift.
Alright.
Speaking of acceleration, best sport/racing.
We're gonna breeze this through because there is nothing here. F1 24, EA Sports FC 25, NBA 2K25, Top Spin 2K25, a tennis game, and WWE 2K24. The only racing game is at the beginning, but this is literally just pick your poison. So I'm gonna go with F1 24 because Codemaster still has enough dignity in my opinion. Moving on. Dej.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't care.
Java.
F1 because, again, least baggage.
Moving on. Now we have Mesh Multiplayer for outstanding online multiplayer gameplay and design, including co-op and massive multiplayer experience, irrespective of game, genre, or platform. All returners, we have Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Tekken 8, and Space Marine 2. Okay, outside of Helldivers 2 and Black Ops 6, all the others do have enough of a solid foundation to be contenders, but I gotta to give it to Super Mario Party Jamboree because that's literally one of its selling points.
Yep.
That's an easy one. Dej?
Mario Party.
Yeah. Again, I'm sorry for Space Marine 2, the multiplayer, I know it's very good, but Mario Party is another class. Jova, go on.
Yeah, my vote goes to Super Mario Party Jamboree. Like, the point of it is not only multiplayer, but just to have as much insane fun with multiplayer as possible. Like, seriously, at some point we gotta have more Mario Party sessions between the two channels.
Sure.
That's read the next one, please.
Best adaptation. Recognizing outstanding creative work that faithfully and authentically adapts a video game to another entertainment medium.
First
We're
contestant.
finally here.
Arcane by Riot.
Once again, the entire description goes into the toilet with the first contender.
Like, look, I like Arcane, don't get me wrong, but they didn't even really have much of a story to adapt in the first place, and it's noticeably different in a lot of areas.
Go with the other one.
Okay, Your Honor, League of Legends.
That's
Also, Arcane even fully out yet. God damn it.
go on.
Yeah, that's a bit cheating.
Read the rest.
Fallout, Bethesda, Killer Films, Amazon, MGM Studios. Okay, so Pedro keeps praising this.
Clown shoes.
Pedro keeps praising this because of Jonathan Nolan,
the creator, that did I forgot. I think it was the
Person of Interest.
All right.
Knuckles, Sega, Paramount, no. Like a Dragon, Yakuza, Sega, Amazon, MGM Studios.
Nope.
It's so boring. How do you make like a Dragon product adaptation boring? Shame on you.
Look, the fact that they had to preface that series coming out by saying, "Well, it's not going to be the same, but we are proud in making our own route," was the first red flag.
The Takashi Miike movie at least had a bit of soul in it.
And Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Croft.
No, good animation wasted on a very questionable script.
Okay, I have the only one that I have seen here is unfortunately Knuckles, but I am not giving it any flowers because that show is legitimately bad and symbolizes everything wrong with the movie.
Not just that, I argue some of its choices, particularly also for comedy theming, are in very poor taste, like comparing Knuckles' struggle as an echidna to the fucking Jewish Holocaust. Are you high?
Especially
so
Tio, it's actually a reference to the Archie comics because of Ken Penders's weird obsession.
I wish I could say he's joshing you, but no, that is legit
also coming
what
with the Paramount's awful statement in regards to the whole situation in Palestine at the moment. Just no, this does not deserve an award.
Look, I'm a Sonic nut. I love the movies. I am happy that the movies helped bring a whole comeback era for Sonic. I'm not voting for the Knuckles series because, first of all, let's ignore the controversies. Let's just look at the fact that the title is a flippin' lie. This is not the Knuckles series. This is the Wade Williams TV series. And congrats. They may have made the worst Sonic character possible with Wanda. Because, yes, even there's somebody who actually loves the Knuckles series. They specifically made a cut that takes out Wanda's series. She is that bad.
Hey, did you know the person who plays Wanda in that show is the English voice actress for Jun Kazama in that Tekken OVA?
I think we did.
She was also on
Knives Out every day.
I think we might have mentioned when we commented on it. Anyway, my point in all of this is that this is another pick your poison situation, so I'm going with the Fallout series. I don't like what they did towards New Vegas, but goddamn, it's really just the best of the bunch in this.
But Tio,
this is miserable.
But Tio, what about the Tomb Raider series? That was supposedly going to revitalize the franchise.
Again, good animation, wasted on a questionable script, and they turned one of the semi-recurring characters into a very questionable camp gay stereotype, and I'm like, is this okay for the LGBT community? I do not know. But Dej, what about you?
I'm going with Fallout as much as I hate to give Todd Howard a W.
I know. It's pick your poison.
Well, that's just the messed up thing. Arguably, Fallout has the least baggage of these. Like, the Knuckles series, that's its thing. Like a Dragon is just, no, you do not make a Yakuza adaptation boring. This is from the same guy who...
Wait, Jova, did you know that they were told not to play any of the games, like the actors?
Oh,
my God.
great! Because that always works so great. Yes, thank you. I don't want to feel like anything is being adapted from the franchise that I like and is probably the only reason I'm watching this. It's genius. But okay, Tomb Raider. Oh, God, Tio already pointed that out. This is definitely going to be a competition between Arcane and Fallout. Arcane, regardless of, the League of Legends controversies or how well or bad it adapts League for what lore it has, essentially, is a series that people have enjoyed. Mostly thanks to the whole sisterly thing going between Vi and Jinx, essentially, and, well, people do love themselves a crazy girl in Jinx. Fallout, again, ironically, Fallout is the series that has itself the most together. Like, it came out and, from what I can understand, is just a legit good series without any strings attached, essentially. And yes, I get it that it's a series instead of a game, but it feels so ironic, sadly, to have a Fallout thing where something's just good without strings attached.
I mean, yeah. Even though I do plan on watching that, and it's like, okay, clips I've seen, this looks fun. But I guess it's one of those. It's not like, I guess I'm like the song fan. It's like, well, it's not what I want an adaptation, but it's like if it's still good, I'll give it its flowers.
And make no mistake, a lot of this is just that Fallout is the sole survivor. Not the sole survivor. Arcane's good.
Ironically.
But I gotta give it to Fallout because, well, again, Arcane ain't all out yet. I get it that maybe the judges got to see the full version, but I don't know. I'm
hearing like some mixed things from Arcane from reviews, so it just kind of comes off as...
The general consensus that, while technically not completely bad, focusing on Season 2 completely once again on Vi and Jinx felt like a bit of a step down instead of trying to branch out and do the same treatment to other classic standing LOL characters.
I do feel the need to ask, though, do we think that awards like these may actually be influenced by what has an announcement, so it would be convenient to give one of them an award and then segue into an announcement?
No, that's usually tied to the announcers that had to mention about the awards. Remember, they did it a couple of times with stuff like the people involved in the Guillermo del Toro movie the other year.
And speaking of announcements, our next category is Most Anticipated Game, recognizing an announced game that has demonstratively illustrated potential to push the gaming medium forward, aka what's the most hyped thing on the market. Our categories are Death Stranding 2 from Jeff's baby boy Kojima, Ghost of Yotai, the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, Grand Theft Auto 6, probably going to be the one that wins, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, a worthy contender, and Monster Hunter Wilds. Like, look, regardless of what one I'm voting for, I'm calling it Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to win. Like,
very likely.
The saying has been, we got X before GTA 6, essentially. Like, GTA 6, look, even if I'm not the biggest fan of Grand Theft Auto, I am not going to deny the power that Rockstar has, especially ever since they released Grand Theft Auto 5 and Red Dead Redemption 2, essentially.
All right.
Now, for what I personally vote for, though, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
I'm also voting for Metroid Prime 4, but I have to ask, why isn't Doom: The Dark Ages here? Really, that's supposed to come out next year. Why isn't it here?
My best guess would be that they figured these are more hyped, but couldn't we have fit that in for a 6 slot while we're at it? Like,
maybe
I'm unfamiliar
they
with...
think, GTA 6 is gonna win anyway, so just put some titles here.
This is the most blatant advertisement this might come as a shock. Monster Hunter Wilds. I just like seeing people get excited for Monster Hunter.
Enjoy being filtered by Gormagala again. Alright, next category, Content Creator of the Year. We have 4 people who I don't know anything about, and Usada Pekora, so please vote that as I'm about to do.
Yeah.
I'm probably. Yes. I'm voting for her as well because she's the one I'm the most familiar with out of this bunch.
Sorry for all the other guys involved. I'm sure you're probably great in your own right, but I'm following the war criminal. Moving on. Next up is Best Esport Game. Yeah, these last couple of categories are always the quickest. We have CSGO 2 by Valve, Dota 2 by Valve, League of Legends, Death, Mobile Legends, Bang Bang, okay, and Valorant. As per tradition, I'm voting for CSGO. Moving on, Jova.
Valorant.
Okay, what is Valorant?
It's another hero shooter, kind of like Overwatch.
Okay.
Made by the same team behind League of Legends at that. But
because whenever I'm at the train station, I do see like huge advertisements for it. I'm just
it
like,
has a solid community, basically.
I want to be fair to Valorant, essentially. It is not the devs' fault that League of Legends has the reputation it does. That is strictly on the player base.
Is it connected to League?
No, it doesn't. I don't think it even has same characters. Maybe cosmetic cameos, but I don't remember.
There may have been a Jinx cameo, but other than that, no.
What about you?
Yeah, I guess I'll give it to Counter-Strike 2. I'm impressed that this is still going.
Valve knows how to keep something going to an extent. They even managed to.
How about Half-Life 3?
They managed to even fix the bot crisis from Tier 2. Half-Life 2 got updated recently to polish it more, so the sign seems to be pointing out that Valve might be genuinely working for Half-Life 3. We'll have to see in the future. Alright then. Next up, we have the Best Esport Athlete. Okay, let's go with I think some of them are from the other years. We have 33, Alex Sib, Chovy, Faker, Zivu, and yeah, I'm not pronouncing that. I'm voting for Faker because it's the name that I remember the most from the other years. So moving on, Jova.
I too will be voting for Shadow the Hedgehog.
That damn hedgehog here of all places. Hedgehog.
Yeah, I'll go with Faker. I'm genuinely surprised that we never see anybody from the fighting game community.
Yeah,
it's weird.
It's always about shooters and MOBAs.
We used to see them more back in the day, but nowadays, yeah.
Anyway, next we have Best Esport Team. We have
3 League of Legends contenders. Good lord.
One of them is Bilibili Gaming, another is Gen G, and the other is T1. Then we have Team Liquid for Dota 2, and the one that I vote, Navi, for Counter-Strike, because as per tradition, I'm voting from these mass stuff that involves stuff like CSGO, so I'm voting that. Jova.
I'm voting Navi.
Edge.
Yeah, Navi.
Alright.
Unanimous.
Look, my agenda is to never vote for anything League.
And with that brings us to an end, I believe.
Alright, closing thoughts and predictions about the trailers, Jova.
Okay, like I've said, we unfortunately I feel like we saw even more repeats in game contenders this year than last year, which is unfortunate since some categories had weird omissions in favor of some of those repeats. Let's see. I do predict that, much as Jeff may not like it, we're gonna get a Sonic announcement of something, essentially, since the series has been on an all-time high, keeping the momentum up with announcements, essentially. And while we do have that DLC for the Sonic X Shadow Generations game coming, there does seem to be something on the horizons that may be it for it. Maybe we might also get a Kingdom Hearts announcement, since Well, recently Missing Link has been delayed, so they may need something to
And like I
keep
said,
audiences going.
like I said, Jova, they seem if my predictions are correct when it comes to the marketing, with Rebirth being done and 17 probably in the works, Square is probably banking on its next big thing being Kingdom Hearts 4. Haley Jonesbone did mention recently that he believed not much of a script was being done, but I can't believe they have at least one trailer to show potentially.
Now, I know Nintendo have sworn up and down we're not going to see any hide nor hair of the Switch successor until next year. But God, wouldn't it be funny if they do just show a sneak of it here at the Game Awards? They're probably not going to,
I
but
can imagine they might be doing something like, oh, we cannot announce the console, but here's a trailer of a game that showcases what it can do.
that would be a good compromise in that regard. Speaking of Nintendo, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a Metroid Prime 4 trailer.
Is the Mario movie 2 supposed to be released next year? I forgot.
2026.
Okay, so we cannot have a trailer right now.
Maybe we might get a peek at that Zelda movie being made by Sony.
No, thank you.
No, because they haven't announced casting yet. What's the one that's going to have Mega Man, Concord?
Oh, this is, but that's it partially already out. I forgot its name.
Oh. Wait. That new Mega Man series is already out?
No, it's a series that involves a person experiencing games that they play in the role of the protagonist, and each episode is kind of like Captain N. Each episode is dedicated to a game in particular, except the protagonist fits in the shoe of the protagonist of the game. And one of the episodes is Concord themed. Oops.
Oh, yeah, that did not age well. But speaking of the movies here, I would not be surprised if we get like a final Sonic free movie trailer before the movie comes out.
That is true. The Game Awards are on December 12th, and the movie comes out a few weeks later. So
it would be a nice parallel to how they had the Sonic 2 movie trailer at the Game Awards, along with that trailer for Sonic
Secret Level, that's what it's called.
Okay, then.
Secret Level.
I just hope that if that's the case, we do not have a repeat of Jim Carrey doing that weird Scottish thing. I know that you laughed at that, Jova, but I found it very cringy.
It was cringe, but it's Carrey, so it worked for me at least.
As for me, I'm keeping my expectations low, but I'm open up to everything. To be honest, the announcements are the most interesting part of the awards anyway.
I mean, that's the reason why we all watch them.
Very likely.
Yeah. Oh, we'll see that game from the Celeste developers that was announced like a couple of years ago.
Who knows?
Hey, maybe we'll finally get Silk Song.
Jova, no, just
too soon.
Just no.
Just pretend it doesn't exist so you can move on with your life.
You know what I'm looking forward to? You know them, you love them. My favorite, the Stop Baby commercials.
Yes!
I really hope they return this year too. Last year it was more contained because they had only one, if I remember correctly. But it was still one.
Let's up the ante. Make video game characters tell you to stop.
They actually did it one year. Well, okay, it was fictional. It was kind of those generic game, that tells you, but as the protagonist telling you to stop vaping. But they had that thought process. So yes.
No, okay. God, dang it! No. I know exactly what we're gonna see.
What?
We're going to have some. This is an Xbox advertisement. Because I don't know what Microsoft's new marketing plan is now.
Also, if they do the same thing that they did last year in relation to the year before, we might have Geoff or someone else lampshade the whole wrap it up thing, and I just know they're not gonna do it in the most graceful way, so I'm bracing for that too. But I guess that's kinda it, so I hope you enjoyed our predictions, and we'll see what happens on the actual night of the Game Awards. I will probably still be only text only. Who knows what's gonna happen. See ya.
See ya.